Hi everyone, this is Professor RT with the second in a three-part series of lectures on the instructional manual. And this week we will be looking at the sections of the instructional manual. As you know, last week we looked at what are instructions, the different components of instructions, and how to put together good instructions. This week, as I said, we'll be looking at the different sections of the instructional manual. Now, I've put together an introductory video for you, and we're just going to watch that right now and then get right into our lecture. Here we go. Hi everyone, this is Professor RT with another Doodly video, and this time I wanted to talk to you about some of the common sections of the instructional manual. And notice I said common because not all of these sections are found in every instructional manual. However, there are two sections that are found in every instructional manual, and you absolutely cannot leave these sections out. They are the title and the introduction. Now, these are two very important sections because they tell the reader what the instructions are for and what the instructions include. You don't want to leave those out because you leave the reader without a clue as to what the instructions are about. And then there are other sections. There is the general notice section, which includes notes, cautions, warnings, and danger. Then there's the technical background or theory section, and this tells you what you need to know to be able to use the instructions. You also have the equipment and supplies section, then the discussion of steps section, which includes procedures, tasks, and steps. Now, the discussion of steps are key, and this is because that's what the instructions are about. Without them, you won't have instructions. And they include fixed order steps. And these are steps that are performed in the order that they are presented. You don't want to vary from those steps. You have to follow them step by step, so to speak. Then you also have the variable order steps. And these are steps that can actually be performed in any order or practically any order. Then you have the alternate steps, and these are steps with more than one way to accomplish the same thing or complete a procedure. Now, after that, you have the nested step, and this is a complex steps that have to be broken down into sub steps. And then you have the stepless instructions, and I tell you, I don't even want to know what that is about. We hardly use those steps. Now, as you learn, I want you to ask yourselves a couple questions. What sections do I need to include in the instructional manual? How do I write these sections? Do I need general notices? And then how many tasks and steps do I need to have in each sections? Ask yourself these questions and let's get started writing our instructional manual. Excellent. So that's a brief introduction to the sections of the instructional manual, and I hope you enjoyed it and learned something from it at least. Now, as the video indicated, we're talking about the most common sections of the instructional manual. And these are sections that you will more than likely find in all instructional manuals. But these are not the only sections that you'll find in instructional manuals, as instructional manuals vary depending on what the needs are. So you want to bear that in mind. But as the video pointed out, there are actually two sections that are always included in instructional manuals. And the first one is the title, of course, because it tells you what we're giving instructions on. And then you have the introduction, because that identifies the procedure, it indicates the audience, the requirements, and it gives an overview of what will be covered in the instructional manual. Now, this is a schematic view of what your instructional manual might look like. It doesn't necessarily have to be constructed like this. And you can see you have the title, and then you have that introduction block, and then you have a section after the title, which in most cases is equipment and supplies. And this section has two columns, one for the equipment and supplies, and then the other column would be for more details if you needed it. Let's go into exactly what is the introduction and what does it include. Well, a good introduction indicates the specific tasks or procedures to be explained, as well as the scope of coverage. That is what won't be covered. I want you to think of this. Mistress Daisy goes into the store to buy a bicycle for her son, Tommy, who's 7 years old. She takes the bicycle home to Mr. Daisy, who then unpacks the bicycle, uses the instructions in the box that came with the bicycle to put the bicycle together. They then give the bicycle to little Tommy, who jumps on the bicycle and promptly rides into the column of the gate and breaks his arm. Mistress Daisy then sues the company for negligence because she says the company did not give instructions on how to ride the bicycle. I know you're saying, crazy, professor. And it actually is, but these are cases that have actually happened. The company failed to state exactly what the instructions would not cover. So then the court could argue that it was reasonable to conclude that since this was a bicycle, the instructions would also include how to ride a bicycle. Or here's another example, guys. I know that one is crazy. Here's another example. And you see this every single day. Many of you eat peanut butter. When you buy a jar of peanut butter in the supermarket, if you notice on the side at the bottom right or left corner, you will always see this product contains peanuts. I know that's insane. Why would you have to tell anyone that the peanut butter contains peanut? It says it right there. Well, somebody sued because a relative or a child of theirs had a peanut allergy. They ate the peanut, had a bad allergic reaction. I think someone died, and ever since then they had to begin to put those labels on. Here's another one really quickly. Whenever you buy frozen fish, for example, salmon, whenever you buy frozen fish, whenever you buy salmon, you will always see on the packaging, this product contains fish. Yep, the fish product contains fish. I mean, I don't know what to say, but excuse me, I'm sorry about that. I'm just giving you an example of why you have to ensure that you state in your instructions what you won't cover. It reduces your liability or your exposure to um, to being sued. So always remember that. Good instructions also indicate what the audience needs in terms of knowledge and background to understand the instructions. What do we mean by this? Well, you want to be able to pick up an instructional manual and know whether or not these instructions are for you. For example, your instructions should state that these instructions are for advanced Python users. Once Professor Richards picks up a manual that says these instructions are for advanced users of anything, I know that these instructions are not for me since I'm not an advanced user of anything. Or you need to state that these instructions can be used by those who are novices in Microsoft 365 or novice in something else. Once I see something that says novice, I know those instructions are for me. But you want to state exactly what knowledge or background the users have to have. They have to have a background in nuclear engineering to use these instructions, or a background in solar panel construction in order to use these instruction or this instructional manual. Your introduction also gives a general idea of the procedure and what it accomplishes. Very, very important. You want to sort of give a roadmap of exactly what the procedure is and what it accomplishes. And remember, we learned that the procedure is the overall collection of activities that you are given instructions on. And the procedure will have a number of tasks, and then the task will have a number of steps. For example, how to operate a motor vehicle would be a procedure. But as you know, there are many things involved in operating a motor vehicle. For example, you could have how to turn on the motor vehicle or how to change the brake pads in a motor vehicle. And I do have an example of an instructional manual that dealt with how to um, change the brake pads. And then, of course, the instructional manual indicates the conditions when these instructions should or should not be used. And this is a very important part of instructional manuals, particularly for those who do things like electrical engineering. What are the conditions that you can use these instructions on? Can you use these instructions in wet conditions, or do they primarily have to be used in dry conditions? Can these instructions be used underwater? For example, there's underwater welding or underwater electrical work. Will you be able to use these instructions underwater to be able to stay protected and safe while carrying out the particular procedure? It tells you what are the conditions that you should use, or what are the conditions these instructions can be used under. And of course, it gives an overview of the content of the instruction. Right? So that's what the introduction deals with. Very, very important component of the instructional manual. And that's the second section. The first section would be the title, and then the second section would be the introduction. Let's move on to the other section. And this section would be the special notices or general notices. You'll find that these descriptions are used interchangeably. Now, the special notice or general notices might be a section, but generally are included throughout your instructional manual. And what are they? Well, they are general warnings, caution, danger notices. And you use special notices to alert readers to the possibility of ruining their equipment, messing up the procedure, hurting themselves, or emphasizing key points or exceptions. And these are very important um, to your instructional manual. You cannot leave these out. Most instructional manuals will have some kind of special slash general notices included in them. So let's look at the four major general slash special notices that we normally include in technical writing in our instructional manuals. The first one is the note. And this is what the note might look like. Housekeeping rules and safety notification. Then, of course, we have the caution. This is what it would look like. And if you notice they're color coded, then you have the warning. This is what the warning normally looks like. Then, of course, you have the danger. That's what it can look like sometimes. And we want to look at each one of them individually, how they are written. We're going to learn about in the subsequent third lecture in the series. But let's just take a look at each one of them and what they are for. So we're going to look at first the note. And this is what the note is used for. The note is used to emphasize points or reminders or indicate minor problems in a procedure. And I want you to take note of this. This is basically talking about the procedure itself and how it is written. You want to emphasize points in the procedure. You want to create a reminder or indicate minor problems in the procedure. That's what the note is used for. And you'll find notes across most instructional manuals. And you'll find that you will be using it quite regularly in yours because you might want to emphasize something that you deem important. Then we have the caution. Now we moved from note to caution, and I want you to note, no pun intended, note the progression of each special notice. We have here the caution. Now, the caution is used to warn readers about possible damage to equipment or data. Do we see some differences here? The previous one spoke about how the instructions are written. Now we're talking about the possibility of damage to the equipment itself. To warn readers about possible damage to equipment or data, excuse me, to warn readers about potential problems in the outcome of what they are doing, or warn about potential negative experiences that they might have. And so this has to do with the equipment itself and the possibility of there being damage to the equipment in one way or the other. So that's the caution. So we have the note. Notice the progression, or some people might say the escalation in severity. We go from the instruction itself to equipment, and then we're moving to the warning. Now, the warning makes a big transition. Warnings are used to warn readers about the possibility of minor injury to themselves or others. You notice we moved from the instructions themselves to the equipment and machinery, damage to the equipment or machinery, and from that we moved to human uh, damage, where there can be human injury, minor injury to themselves or to others. So now we're looking at our person. There's a big transition there when you use warnings. And you'll see why I'm emphasizing this a little later on. So warnings are used to warn readers about the possibility of minor injury to themselves or others. And of course, the final one is danger. Oh, that's scary stuff. Now, danger is used to warn readers about the possibility of serious or fatal injury to themselves. Serious or fatal injury to themselves. You see the progression? We moved from warning to danger, where the warning stated explicitly that there was the possibility of minor injury to their person. And we've moved to danger, where there's the possibility of serious or fatal injury to themselves or others. That means someone can die. For those of you who go to the gym, I like to work out. I have a gym in my basement, and on the equipment, on some of the equipment, you will see that danger sign, do not go, or you will see a warning sign, do not stand on this position, on this part of the equipment. Uh, Warning, do not use this equipment before doing something. Uh, Danger signs, danger special notices are very, very serious. Now, here's something I want you to take note of. You should not use these uh, special notices interchangeably. That is, you should not use a caution where a warning is, is needed, or you should not use a note where a danger is needed, or you should not use a danger where warning special notice is needed. Think about it. Why do you think this is? Well, if you said to yourself you do not want to minimize the impact of each of these special notices, or you do not want to confuse people, then you were correct. Using a danger where a warning would suffice is like crying wolf, wolf. And for those of you who don't know that story, there was a young man who lived somewhere, and he would go into the fields to work each day by himself. And every day he would scream, wolf, wolf, wolf. And the villagers would run out to save him. And when they came, there was no wolf. The boy was running a prank. And I know we see pranks being played all over the place. Well, one day he went into work in the field. And you know what happened? The wolf finally came. And he screamed, wolf, wolf. And everybody in the village say, oh, that's little Tommy again, just trying to run a prank on us. And no one came to save him. And the wolf ate him up. That's gross, isn't it? Very morbid example. But this is serious business. Your special notice or general notice can mean the difference between life and death. And if something is should be a danger where there's the possibility of serious or fatal injury, and instead of putting the danger, you use a warning where there's the serious, there's the possibility of minor injury, then you are setting someone up to hurt themselves severely. So you want to be careful and ensure that you use special notices correctly. All right, so that's one section, another section of the instructional manual. And as I said earlier, special notices are contained in a section, but they are included throughout the instructional manual. So let's go to our next section of the instructional manual, and that's the background and theory. technical background and theory. Now, some instructions need discussions on backgrounds to clarify the instructions within context, to highlight importance of special notices, and also to give an idea of the theory behind the procedure. For example, if you're constructing a computer, a quantum computer, you want to give the theory, the behind the computer, construction of the computer, the theory that drives its and powers its ability to perform. And this section is very important, especially for CST students and electrical engineering students, because you want to give your audience an idea of the framework that guides your instructional manual, the theoretical framework that is. So your technical background or theory are very, very important. However, not every instructional manual will have them or will even need them. But more than likely, because you are given instructions on a technical or scientific task, then you will have a technical background or theoretical underpinnings. And um, if you have ever bought medication at the pharmacy, whether it be allergy tablets, whether it be cough syrup, in the box, you will always have that little sheet of paper that is folded up very nicely. And when you open it up, there's this wealth of information on it. Sometimes most people don't read it, but it normally gives you the theoretical underpinnings of the medication and how they work, what are the dominant chemical components being used in it. So that's for your technical background or theory. And then our next section is the equipment and supplies. Now, I am not giving these to you in the order that they would be in your instructional manual because the equipment and supplies are normally right after the introduction. Now, the equipment and supplies will give you a list of things you need to gather before you start the procedure. Now, one of the worst things is to get a set of instructions, guys, that does not tell you what you need. And then you start to work on putting together whatever it is you're putting together or doing whatever it is you're doing using the instructions only to find out halfway through or that you needed to have some tools or other components in order to complete the procedure. Oh boy, that can be pretty annoying. So your equipment and supplies are a list of things you need to gather before you start the procedure. And these might include equipment. It might include tools you use in the procedure, such as mixing bowls, spoon, bread pans, hammers, drills, and saws. If you're baking, I don't think you should be using hammers or drills or saws. But anyway, we know that these are the equipment that you might need. It might include supplies that you might need, things that are consumed in the procedure. For example, if you're making a cabinet, you're going to use wood. You might use some paint or oil. If you're baking a cake, you might use some flour or oil. And of course, if you're doing woodwork, you'd use some nails. So that's another section that you might include that you should include in your instructional manual. And of course, um, finally, we want to look at the discussion of steps. So we looked at the introduction as a section. We looked at the equipment and supplies. We looked at the background and theory, and we also looked at special notices, which include special notices, which include the note, the caution, the warning, and the danger notice. We want to close this off by looking at the steps, the discussion of steps, because that's what the instructions are all about. You cannot have instructions without the steps, can you? How then would you be able to give those instructions? Well, guys, there are different types of steps as you learned in the video. There's the fixed order steps, there's the variable order steps, the alternate steps, and of course, you have the nested steps. We want to take a look at them one by one. The first one we look at is the fixed order steps. Now, the fixed order steps must be performed in the order that they are presented. So you have step one, step two, step three, step four. In fixed order steps, you cannot skip step two and go straight to step four.
Something went wrong. Please try again.
Oh, that's Siri right here. Oh, Siri's always jumping into a conversation, guys. Anybody wonders if our devices are continually listening to us? I read an article where this actually is true, but I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Let's get back to the lecture. The fixed order steps must be performed in the order that they're presented. As I said before, you cannot skip one step and go to the other. You have to go from step one to step two to step three, four. You have to follow the sequential order of the steps. The steps are fixed. The order of the steps are fixed. You can't change them. You can't alternate them. For example, if you are changing the oil in a car, this is a funny one. Draining the oil is a step that must come before putting in the new oil. And I mean, even if you're not a driver, you don't use a car, you can relate to this. How can you put the oil, the new oil in before you drain the old oil? It doesn't make sense, right? So the order of those steps are fixed. Have to drain the old oil before you put the new oil in. The fixed order steps are normally numbered lists, and these lists are usually vertically numbered lists. So that's the fixed order steps. Then you have the variable order steps. Now, unlike the fixed order steps, the variable order steps can be performed in practically any order. That means that you don't have to go from one to two to three to four to five. It can be one, then five, then two, then six. And you wouldn't have numbers on this one. So it can be this step, then that step, then another step. Remember, when you use numbers, you are actually putting in place a fixed order sequence. For the variable order steps, it can be performed practically in any order. For example, troubleshooting guides that tell you to check this, then check that, where you are trying to fix something. You know, you're troubleshooting your computer. Some people will say that the first thing you should do is restart your computer or restart your phone or your tablet. While others should say the first thing you should do is check into your settings to see what's happening there, or to see whether or not you've updated your device. Does your device need to be updated? Some people will say the first thing you need to do is to check the power. Do you have stable power? Do you have stable internet? So troubleshooting does not necessarily have a fixed order, um, or necessarily have fixed order steps. Troubleshooting would have variable order steps, and there are other things that would have variable order steps. You can do these kinds of steps in practically any order. With this type, the bullet list is the appropriate format when writing these steps. So you wouldn't use numbers in these steps. You would use bullets, since bullets indicate that even though this is the first step that you see, it is not necessarily the first step that you have to take. It's just one of the 3 or 4 steps that you should take. Now, after the variable order step, we have the alternate order steps. And this is an interesting one. The alternate order steps is where two there are two or more ways to accomplish the same thing. So two or more ways to accomplish the same thing are presented. So you have this, you can accomplish a particular procedure by doing it this way, or you can accomplish it by doing it another way. You might have a procedure or step A, and you might have step B. You might be able to go from City Tech to Barclays Center by following J Street all the way to Atlantic and then taking Atlantic all the way up to Barclays Center. That's one way. Or you might be able to follow J Street to Fulton Street, then Fulton Street to Bush Extension, and then Flatbush Extension to Barclays Center. Those are two different ways to accomplish the same thing. Variable order, alternate order steps gives you different ways to accomplish the same thing. It's used when various conditions might exist. For example, are you working in cold or hot weather? Maybe if you're working in cold weather, the steps that you need to take might be different than if you're working in hot weather, but you're accomplishing the same task. If you're working underwater, for example, laying electrical wires underwater versus laying electrical wires on dry land, the steps would be different, but you want to accomplish the same thing. These are alternate order steps. And of course, you use a bulleted list with this type, or they're inserted between the alternatives, or the lead in indicating that alternatives are about to be presented. Great stuff here, huh? So we've looked at so far the fixed order steps where we have a fixed order of steps that must be performed in the order presented. And then we looked at variable order steps, which do not have to be done in a specific order. Now, the fixed order steps, you would use numbers to delineate the steps since numbers indicate a fixed order. Variable order, you would use bullets. And then, of course, you have alternate order steps, which there are two or more ways to accomplish the same thing. For example, when there are different climate conditions. And now we want to complete this with the nested steps. And these are another set of interesting steps because these are complex individual steps within a procedure. So these are steps within steps. So these are when the steps need to be broken down into sub-steps. So you might have a procedure. The procedure is how to operate your microwave oven? Well, one of the steps could be how to set the microwave. One of the tasks could be how to set the microwave clock. Now, within that task, there might be some steps, and within those steps, you might have to take some other steps. Those are sub steps. In this case, you would have indentations that are further and sequence the sub steps as A, B, C, and so on. So your first steps would be one, two, three. Your sub steps would be A, B, C. These are steps within the steps. Now, in our next lecture, we're going to be looking more closely at these different steps. We're going to be looking more closely at the um, special notices or general notices, the note, the caution, the warning, and the danger. And we're going to be looking more closely at the steps that you need to use in your instructional manual. I hope this helps. Feel free to reach out to me via my email if you have any questions. We also have a discussion board that you will be completing. Feel free to ask questions in that discussion board also. All right. Thanks a lot, guys, for sticking by. God bless you. Take care now. Bye bye.